So let's say you built a fancy new API with Node, but when you deploy it out to the production environment, it's still trying to connect to your test data because, well, that's what you were testing with when you were building it on your machine. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use a package called .env as well as environment variables in general to control situations like this and properly deploy your code out to a different environment. Before we get started, if you like content like this, I generally produce new videos every single week, so do me a favor and hit that subscribe, the like, the notification bell, you know, that normal YouTuber thing. I'm also live right here on YouTube every Thursdays right around noon. Check my Twitter at BrianMMDev for any updates to that schedule. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so to provide some context as to what we're going to be working on, I built a small API using Express, and it's using Fauna as its backend data store. I'm specifically using the Fauna service package, which I wrote as a utility package to help me access the service a little bit easier. So we're instantiating a new version of that service using the API key that we've been granted from Fauna. And then we just have a couple of routes here. We've got one to get all the tasks, to list a single task. We're building a like to-do database is what we're working with. Create a task, update, basic CRUD operations. We're running on port 3000. And to demonstrate how a lot of this works, we could see I have a .htp file, which uses the REST client plugin for vscode. So let's start up the API. I'm going to open up a new terminal and do node app.js just to start it up. You can see we get an output of API is running. I know we're on port 3000 since that's what I've defined inside of the app.js file. And we have we have all these requests here that we can test out with. So sending a request, you'll see we got an empty array because there are no tasks. But if I go ahead and create a task, you can see we're provided an ID that comes back with our request. And then if I send request to get the list of tasks again, now we're getting that one task. Let's add a couple more tasks in here. Let's say record the YouTube video. What else do we want to put in here? Let's say write some code. And let's send that request again. And lastly, let's do feed the dog. Just to get some test data in our test database, which we're going to be working with. And if I try to request all those tasks back, you can see we have our list here. Okay, so our API is indeed working. Now, the problem is I've set up this Fauna database as a test instance where I can basically test data sending back and forth. And when I deploy that out into a production environment, it's not the same data we want to be working with. We want to work with something that's different, that's unique, that has production data. You can imagine over time, as you build out a production version of an application, you want your database instances to be completely separate. You want one from development, you want one for production, so this way the two don't really intermingle that much. So now back inside of Fauna's dashboard, you can see the name of our database we have is Environment Management Test Database, and we have a collection of tasks which we're displaying the data we just sent to it. So now if we try and deploy this out into production, it's going to still attempt to connect to this data. So what we have to do in order to get around that is inside of our project here, I'm going to open up a terminal using the shortcut control backtick or command backtick on a Mac. Let's stop the API from running, and I'm going to install a package called .env. So npm install .env, and we'll hit enter. This is going to install this package. Now, what this package lets us do is read .env files off of our file system, so this way we can set those environment variables. And the reason this is important is because it provides a universal way where you can set environment variables regardless of what system you're on, because Windows and Mac and Linux all do it a little bit differently. And then when we deploy this out into production, we can set the environment variables manually inside of the production environment later, which is going to be AWS Elastic Beanstalk, which is a simple to use AWS service, which handles most of the heavy lifting of deploying out applications, and Node.js just so happens to be one of the templates that they support. So in order to use our package, I'm going to add a new line right up top. We don't need to actually set this to any kind of variable. So we could just require .env. And very important, .config needs to go at the end of it, which is what basically tells the package to pull in that .env file. So we'll create a new .env file. A .env file is just a key value text file that lets you store values inside that you don't necessarily want to be embedded inside of your code. So let's say Fauna API key will be our environment variable we put here. So I'm going to open and close a string, and then we're going to get our API key that we've been provided from Fauna, put this inside of here, save both of these files, and then we're actually inside of the Fauna service. We're going to remove this. Now, the way that you can pull any environment variable into a Node.js application is using process.env and then whatever the name of your environment variable is. So I'm going to go back into our .env file, copy the API key, so to speak, and go ahead and save that. So now we'll close this. We don't need that open anymore. Let's run our API one more time just to make sure that this is still working. So I'll do node app.js. API is running. Let's go ahead and send the request to get all of our tasks again, just to make sure the same data comes back. I'll hit send, and you can see we're indeed getting that same list of tasks that we created earlier in the video back because we're still connecting it to that same test instance. Now, one important thing to note is you never want environment variables stored alongside with your repository. So we're going to go into gitignore, and then we're going to add another line here and put .env. And if I save this, you'll notice on the left-hand side, the .env file just went slightly gray, which means that it's not going to be tracked by Git. So when we commit our code up into GitHub, that's not going to be stored along with the repository, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so I'm logged into AWS, and I want to find the service called Elastic Beanstalk. So if you click on the search dialog up here, let me make this a little bit bigger. We're going to search for Elastic Beanstalk. Okay, there it is. Let's go ahead and select that. And now you can see this is a fairly new AWS tenant, so I don't have anything here. Let's go ahead and click Create Application. Set our application name to Fauna. We'll set our application name to Tasks API. We don't need to add any tags. Our platform, we can just select Node.js. And the rest of these defaults are fine the way they are. So we also need to make sure we're going to upload our code. Now, what we need to do is we need to upload a zipped folder of our code itself. So I'm going to right-click on our any file in vscode and click Reveal in File Explorer on Windows. So now that we're inside of our project itself, let's select all the files, right-click, and send to compressed folder. And this is going to create a zip file inside of the same folder. We just call this project. Okay, like that. We are going to upload a local file, and let's click Choose File to browse for the application project. There we go. There's the zip folder. Let's go ahead and open that guy up. And file uploaded successfully. Let's go ahead and click Create Application. And this process is going to take a few minutes, so this is definitely a good point to step away and get some coffee. So we'll be right back. As a quick aside before we continue, I did realize I forgot something about Elastic Beanstalk. You need it to always respond to the base request, the base URI and respond with the 200. So what I did is I added line 42, which all this does is just respond with 200 on that exact request. So with that, I'm going to re-upload the file and we'll be able to resume what we were working on. Okay, so our API is deployed, however, we need to make a slight change to the configuration, which is going to be done in the environment variable section anyway. So by default, when you deploy an application out to Elastic Beanstalk, it will try and forward traffic from port 80 to port 8080. Now, since our API is running on port 3000, we need to tell Elastic Beanstalk that. So if we click on configuration on the left-hand side here, and we click on edit in the software line, and then if we scroll down towards the bottom, you'll see there's this section called environment properties. And this is where we can actually set environment variables inside of our application here, as well as some configuration variables for the Elastic Beanstalk instance that's running. So let's go ahead and click under name. We will set the first one to port, and we're going to set this value to 3000. And now for our database, let's go ahead and go back to Fauna. So I selected the database environment management prod database, which is not our test database. And if I scroll down to security, click on new key. And let's select server for the role so we don't give it too many permissions. And let's go ahead and just click save. And this is the new API key that we're going to use in order to access the production version of the database. So if I go back in here and let's see, what did we name our variable to? It was fauna underscore API key. So I'm going to set this inside here to fauna underscore API key. And then we'll set the value to that which we just pulled out of fauna. Let's go ahead and click apply. And once it's finished changing, our entire environment's going to restart with those new settings that we just set up, so it's going to take another minute here too. Okay, so our application is finished restarting, and you can see the health is okay. Now there is this URL that's right up here. This is the URL that we're going to be able to use to access our API. So if I get back into VS Code, I'm actually going to open up the API test.htp again, and we're going to create some new tests here. I'll say get all tasks from prod. If I can spell right, and that's just going to be a GET request on our base URL, but then we're also going to put tasks at the end of it because that's the route that we're using to access our tasks API. Let's go ahead and click send request. And this is fully to be expected. We don't want to have any data come back because if we did, that would mean something's not working right. And for the sake of testing these things side by side, make sure we still have our API running. Let's go ahead and request from localhost. And you can see we get our 3 tasks back, right? So now let's go ahead and create a new request and just seed some data inside of this, inside of our production database. Create task in prod. will be the name of this test, and this is going to be a post. Same thing with that URL. Let's get rid of some of this extra stuff here we don't need. I'm going to minimize this so we got some more room to see here. And let's set a content type. Content type is going to be application/JSON, because we're going to be sending it JSON data. And then the name of our task is going to be testing the prod database. And we'll set is complete to false. Save it again, and let's send a request. And we could see where we've created that. If I request back the list here, we're getting that new task that we just created. However, if we send the same request to localhost, it's the same application, same code, but the difference is that environment variable points to which database we're actually looking at, which one up in Fauna. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Now with a setup like this, you basically any kind of environment specific configurations, this is exactly how you would do this. You would create a .env file locally, or set your environment variables in your specific operating system, which I'm not going to go into in this video. And then you can pull those in during testing. When you deploy your code out into production, you just set the environment variables in whatever environment you want to work with. So that's all I've got for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're interested in more content like this, like I said at the beginning of the video, subscribe, hit the like, hit the bell, all that normal YouTube stuff. You can also chat with me directly on my Discord, fullstack.chat. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter at BrianMMDev, and I stream here live every single Thursdays right around noon. Check Twitter for updates to the schedule. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.